agenda for this evening. Are there any additions, corrections, or updates that anybody would like to make? I have some I'd like to propose then. Under new business, I would like to move the Planning Commission meeting schedule to B and add as A data center working group. If you were at the board meeting last night, you heard that they passed the moratorium, which means that we have a clear check mark to start our work. And also under discussion items, I would like to add before the next regular meeting agenda, or depending on what you guys respond with, subcommittee reports and updates, which we may or may not be able to do in July. And depending again on your perspective under discussion items, add master plan discussions. Even though the board has some work to do, personally I don't want to lose momentum on that. If there's anything we can consider without their input. So it's just a discussion item.
Is that B then?
That would be B. And C would, pardon me? Okay. And C would be subcommittee reports.
So what's A? The next meeting?
Or I mean, A would be the subcommittee reports. B would be master plan, and C would be the next meeting agenda because it would be dependent on what we talk about in the discussion items. That being said, may I have a motion?
Move as amended.
Second.
George and Kay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you, Commissioners. And aside from that, I have no remarks at the beginning of the meeting. So we have minutes from our last meeting in May to approve. I believe there is one amendment. I have maybe a couple corrections. Okay.
So Martha and I received, because our draft minutes are posted, Martha and I received two proposed corrections to the minutes. So I'd like to go over those. The first one is under, it starts on the first page, which is page 3 of 31, under 12, public hearing on temporary moratorium. A, Craig Bloomer, it starts there. So when we write about the meeting or even about the public comments, our mission is to reflect what was the key points that were discussed at the meeting. And this means summarizing. It is not our role to write word for word what everybody says. On the other hand, we try to use the words that someone used to summarize. So we, for this one, we would like to propose the changes in this section A that are on your table that I'll read now. So you can see that in the sentence that ends with state law for fires, we're proposing to cross out the for fires, and instead, as the third sentence, add the following sentence. Battery storage installations do not need visibility screening, do need visibility screening and fire protection plans, although fire safety designs have improved recently. So we agreed, we listened to the recordings numerous times, and we agreed that this was a point that was made by multiple sentences, and that this is a good summary of that. And so that's why we're taking out the for fires and adding this sentence. Any questions about that? I have one more. So the next one is under 13A, and in that sentence it says less than 15. It should be less than 50. PA 233 regulates 50. So those are Martha and I worked together on those, and based on the comments we received, those are our proposals.
Does anybody else have any additions or corrections to the minutes? I have a possible one depending on whether you go with the international spelling and the spelling that's on my textbook on the topic. And that is under number 11, number A, third line, the word aesthetic. On my textbook, it's spelled with A in the front.
Yes, it is.
That's also the international spelling. The one without an A is only the United States.
Oh.
But on my textbook, it has an A in the front. So I'd like to change it to what the textbook says. And then I don't know if this is correct or not. Under 13K, which you also brought up, but on the first sentence it says the planning commissioner consideration of public hearings. And isn't it the planning commission?
Commission, yeah.
Okay, thank you. We can make that correction, please.
Did you see that, Martha?
I didn't find anything else. I have a motion to approve the minutes as amended and corrected. So moved.
Second.
Second, Julie. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Appreciate your work on that, team. This time we have an opportunity for public comment. I am not a person who puts my clock on 3 minutes. However, I am a person who would appreciate brevity. So if you have something to say, please come up at this time and be as brief as you can. I know, that's 2 pages, Pat.
I memorized the other 5.
Okay.
So, Pat Schloss, 5420 Farrell Road. I spoke with you all a couple months ago, I think in February or March, about the solar ordinance and emailed you information from Harvest Solar that I'm glad to see that you all found useful. I'm sorry I wasn't able to attend May's public hearing. I'd like to echo my concerns about the screening requirements from when I spoke previously. Frankly, I don't understand the logic on many levels. If it's okay to have solar panels on your roof in plain sight of the world, then panels in your backyard should be fine without additional screening. And for the record, panels on your roof should be perfectly fine. Just my own personal experience, my family had roof-mounted solar panels on a barn that burned down 3 years ago. It took us 2 years or so to put up a new barn. We didn't have a south-facing roof, and so we opted to put in a ground-mounted unit. And so we went through a variety of steps with SRI to figure out where we could put it. And so it wasn't enough that we had to put it along the back of our property, but we also had to provide screening and promise that we'd continue to screen it. So I don't understand why the roof of the barn was okay, but my backyard requires additional restrictions. It's been suggested that, and other comments I know that you all received, that screening needs to be year-round, and that if we use deciduous trees to help screen the panels, then leaves fall off the trees, then they need to be replaced or supplemented with coniferous trees. The argument for screening is to keep a natural look. Tonight, when I was out doing my chores, I did a 360 view, right, turned around, and the only coniferous trees that I could find, sorry I'm dizzy now, was on a neighbor's property who has a border of tall coniferous trees that he has for, I assume, privacy. Those are not natural to the trees that we have around us where we live. I frankly think they look ridiculous, but it's none of my business. It's not my property. He's free to put up whatever trees he wants, right? And so my opinion doesn't matter, and nor should it, right? Another neighbor has an attractive shed strategically placed so that we can't see their panels from Zeeb Road, right? Except that looks just enough off that it's obvious they're blocking something, right? And so my point relating these examples is that regardless of what you use to screen solar panels, it's going to look artificial. Some will think it looks ridiculous, some will think it looks fine. A natural form of screening that I did find in the ordinance is distance. Our array is more than 1,100 feet from Farrell and 700 feet from Zeeb. Both of our nearest neighbors' homes are 1,000 feet from our property, and one of them has their own solar panels, and the other, who's on your board, didn't notice that we had them installed for 6 months. The land between us and Zeeb is in the PDR, the land across Farrell from us is in the PDR. there needs to be a more common sense baked into the screening requirements. As much as I think the requirement that the array be behind the house is unnecessary, this should be sufficient screening without additional foliage. Finally, I'd like to comment on the observation that in the master plan, many expressed a desire for screening. Many also expressed an interest in green energy. It's your all's job to balance those two desires. I know it's obvious to you, but just to state it openly, I think there's effectively two Webster Townships. The likely majority of the township who live in large subdivisions with homeowner association policies, but I suspect already have policies on solar panels. There's also the people that live on large lots in rural areas like me and my neighbors, who increasingly now have their own solar arrays. Given the increasing number of people in more areas with those panels, perhaps you can begin to see the split in the population commenting on the master plan. Please, rethink the screening requirements and remove them from the proposed ordinance. I know there's language in the ordinance for the Planning Commission waiver that would likely address specific cases like my own, but these waivers do not ensure protections for landowners long term. As much as I would have preferred the flexibility where we could put our array, say, the 10 acres in front of our house, having them in the backyard should be sufficient without having to worry about whether someone's going to complain about whether or not they're sufficiently screened. Thank you.
Peter Stevens, 7500 Trotters Lane. Ditto, first of all, basically everything you said I basically agree with, and in just the sense of requiring screening. I think I go a little bit further and just asking whether screening should be required in general for these solar array systems. The way that they're designed is just an efficiency issue for me. I think about the reasons that people would be installing these, essentially to save money, be green, try and reduce their load on their finances. And these screening requirements is just an additional burden to bear for these people trying to do something right for the environment and their wallets. Looking through even the ordinance, you have listed on there a couple different examples of trees. That's 8 different trees that it shows for what I'm guessing would be something like 50 feet of road. I'd have to go back and look at the actual standard, but that's somewhere in the vicinity for those 8 trees. You can go down to EarthArt and check. Coniferous trees, you're going to be looking somewhere in that region of like $10,000 to $12,000. If you're looking for non-coniferous trees that are actually large enough to provide any kind of screening, again, you're getting yourself up into the $8,000 to $10,000 range for 50 feet of road just to screen it from view with your 80% opacity thing. It's just going to be restrictive on people's wallets. It's going to be restrictive on their abilities to install green energy and use it. And at least for myself, I'd like to see the Planning Commission consider just getting rid of the screening requirements for home energy solar systems. This is just a personal matter that people are doing on their property for their own personal needs, and I don't believe that it's right to impress others' aesthetics on what people are doing with their personal property. Thank you.
Hi, Alex Burgess, 6767 Scully Road. I have 2 quick points, echoing a lot of what we've already heard. The first is just that it seems obvious to me that the cost of living just in our part of the world is going up. And a lot of the requirements that are being put in this measure just seem to be going to increase the cost of living. Not only for those who are looking to implement solar on their properties or who already have it, but for everyone, because it will be creating new licensing and registration requirements, new compliance checks, new compliance officers who are going to be checking to make sure people have the correct amount of screening, the right type of screening. And I think we should be trying to decrease the cost of living in our community instead of increasing it. And the second point is that it does seem as if the proposed screening requirements are targeting solar owners versus other owners of different types of energy usages. Do we have screening requirements for people who own gas generators for their homes? What about screening requirements for propane tanks? Do we have screening requirements for just electrical transformers that are on your property? You know, personally, I'm not a big fan of the aesthetics of electrical poles and electrical wires, long-distance transmission wires. But I also acknowledge that as part of a modern electrified society, we need those to transmit electricity. And so it seems as if there's a targeting of the solar versus other modern appliances and forms of energy storage and generation. So that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, Mike Angelo, 7373 Webster Church Road. So I get the fun part of telling you this is unenforceable. Okay, first of all, in case you guys didn't know, HOAs can't do this anymore after this. There was a brand new law in 2026. However, since 1937, Michigan Supreme Court has said that you actually need a valid police power, reason, health, safety, welfare. Aesthetics may be an incident, but cannot be the moving factor for any of your ordinances. So, the reason I started looking at this is because of George and Kay and I went this summer to our zoning and planning conference. One of the lovely attorneys said, you can't have only aesthetic ordinances. So, and that's what this is. It's kind of interesting, we just talked about like large-scale power lines. There was actually a case in, oh goodness, this would have been 1969 against the city of Wibsam, where the city was trying to prevent, let's see, DTE, I believe, from, ordinance amendments relating to maximum height of electric structures. And the Supreme Court declared that null and void. The fun part of this one is, what do they say? Oh, let's see. The destructive and highly and unsightly effect which the proposed towers and lines may have upon the scenic beauty of the Wixom area. Oh, I'm sorry. While we're not insensitive to the disruptive and unsightly effect which the proposed towers and lines may have on the scenic beauty of the Wixom area, we cannot sustain the ordinance for purely aesthetic reasons or unsupported fears of the city planners. The ordinance, to the extent that it is predicated upon an exclusively aesthetic basis, is held to be invalid. Got another one. And in case you're wondering, like 37, Elizabeth Lakes Estates versus Waterford in 1947, conservation of property values is not by itself the proper sole objective for exercise of police power by a township. So I kind of think you should get rid of this 3-year requirement altogether. I'm sorry you had to go through it, Mr. Sloss, but I personally do not think it's enforceable. I also want to also agree with, you're making it harder while people are having difficulty paying for the electricity they have. Since 1998, DTE has raised our electric rates 30%, another 10% for gas. We don't need this. This is ridiculous. I don't know where it came from, I won't even talk about it. But solar panels, I'm like, okay, you're an environmentalist. We like solar panels. You told me that. So I think this is a horrible idea. And I think it's going to cost the townships a decent amount of money if someone starts coming after us for it. Thank you.
Anybody else like to make a comment at this time?
Good evening, Paul Griggs, 5170 Gleason Drive. 4 years ago, right now, my wife and I did some bus tours through Europe, Germany, and Czech Republic. And during that hours and hours on the bus, driving through the countrysides, we saw millions of acres of farmland, mostly corn and wheat. And the farmers planted a third of their fields with solar panels. 60% crop, 30% solar panels. And this is the norm. We asked our friends that we visited there with, how long have they been doing this? And our adult friends said, as long as we can remember, that's the way it is. That's the norm. These people live in very rural areas compared to us. Interstates are pretty rare, and they have to be self-sufficient. So every one of these farms is what we would call off-grid. These people are planning for the future. And that's kind of the nature of the description of this committee right now, the planning committee. And what you folks decide affects us marginally, but it affects people that come after us, the people that come after them. And those people over there make a great living, and they're self-sufficient because they took advantage of this solar. Now, I'm not sure what the origin of all this rumpus is here, but as I'm fond of saying sometimes, opinions are like socks. Everybody's got a couple, and some of them stink. And I wouldn't want somebody putting up a huge solar array in front of my house that every morning when I get coffee and look outside and check the weather, I've got to look at that. But there are some sacrifices that we have to make. And if things can be done tastefully, then I say let the people go ahead and build what they want and take advantage of the sun. I'm a retired tech ed teacher, and part of the thing that I did for 22 years was telling 6th, 7th, and 8th graders that I will always be able to put gas in my tank. You probably will be able to, but your kids and your grandkids, nah, you're going to have electric cars. Fossil fuels are going to run out of. We've got to start thinking a little bit differently about what we're doing. So I don't know if what's being considered here is just to levy some blanket rules that have to be followed. But I think a case-by-case situation would be in the best interest of our community here. Because we all moved out to the country, or we grew up here, and we'd like to keep it like it is. And as often as my power goes down, I sure would like to have that battery bank in the garage so it doesn't affect us as much. So I hope you'll take the human sense of it and the long-term consideration when you make the decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to interject and just make a comment here. I saw it last night at the board meeting. Just an FYI, this is a government proceeding. It is not a play. Clapping is really not appropriate in these settings.
I would, I know I clapped simply because I wanted to show support. I see that as not I'm not rewarding a performance. I am making sure that you all know that I wasn't sure if I was going to talk, but me sitting there clapping at least allows you to know that I agree with them. So just so that you know that's where I'm coming from on that. But my, I have a number of issues with the ordinance as it's written. Obviously, everybody here has touched on the big ones. One of the things that I get from this is a big feeling of a restrictive HOA. I have lived in neighborhoods where they would have somebody count how many bushes you had in your front yard, and that they had to be sculpted, they had to be separated. I moved out to the country for that. One of the reasons, I should say, I moved out to the country. So I could do what I wanted with my property. Obviously, I'm not creating an eyesore for people, but just the overreach, and one of the things that, there was a quote of preserving the rural character. One of the things that I think preserves rural character is being allowed to use your land to create energy for your family. So I see it as just the micromanagement associated with this ordinance is, in my opinion, unacceptable for this community. If I wanted that, I could live in Ann Arbor. I don't. It's the truth, but anyway, and I also the other bit was the part of needing to report how much energy would be produced. DTE takes care of all of that kind of stuff, and I guess I didn't quite understand why the township would need to know that information specifically if you're not running the electrical grid. DTE is taking care of all that. Anything that is generated in excess would be sold back. I guess I don't understand why there is the desire to have that information as a requirement. Perez Berquist, 6767 Scully Road.
Sarah,
Sarah Perez Berquist,
Thanks.
how do you spell your last name?
Perez hyphen Bergquist. He also said his name, but we are married. He has the same last name as me.
And it's not required, just so you know. People can speak without giving you their name or their address.
Okay.
So, I'm Christy Angela, 7373 Webster Church, and I actually have some specifics. So in addition to my husband. So when you look at D1, your ground-mounted solar being 20 feet, I don't see any place in this ordinance where you're actually talking perpendicular. My particular solar array my yard is incredibly hilly. Depending on where you're actually going to take that from, my 20 feet would be, if I were going to build it in the future, might be prohibitive. So I can actually get my solar array where I need it to go. Your roof-mounted systems, in terms of being beyond the roof, what difference does it make to us as Webster Township if somebody's going to have their solar array hang off their roof? Because what if the back half of my roof is actually shaded by my trees, and I still want to be able to get the maximum amount of energy? Why are we regulating that? In terms of your wall mounted, my driveway is 1/3 of a mile down. What difference does it make if it's a foot off my wall or not? Why are we regulating that for people? I don't understand. I don't know why those provisions are in there. I don't know where they came from. They seem to be pretty arbitrary. In terms of your surface area, I feel particularly bad for people like Mr. Soft here, who has his barn burned down. And he's a farmer. They'll put his solar array back right up, but what if he wanted to be able to use that solar array and then also be able to use it to actually provide energy for the rest of his farm? He should be able to expand that. You shouldn't be limiting his ability. DTE already does that. Why are we, as Webster, getting into DTE's business, standing in somebody else's lane in terms of why your surface area is regulated? In terms of your environmental setbacks, Kay, our environmentalist, if I have an actual skid steer that goes into my swamp and it pounds down some supports for my actual solar array, it's not hurting my swamp, it's not doing anything after those skid steers back up. Why aren't we using the land? Why aren't we giving people the ability to make their own energy? 30% increase from DTE in the last 10 times they've increased their rates. Another 10% for gas. That's incredible. A 40% increase for those of you who have gas and electric. My house is entirely electric. It's radiant in the ceiling. Before I got my solar panels, my highest electric bill was $1,300 for 1 month. I needed my solar panels. And if I didn't have my yard, and I only had what I had before with 10 acres and 9 of it was actually wetland, I would love to be able to put a solar array there, but there was no way I'm going to be able to do it with this particular ordinance the way it's particularly written. In terms of 2, your ground-mounted solar, when you're looking at giving extra information, why do we actually need to give extra information than what we're already giving you by having a contractor come in and submit plans? Why should we actually have a zoning administrator just be able to arbitrarily say, I also want this? I want to know, where are those connections going to come from? Are they coming from China? I mean, this is super broad when you're looking at any other information related to the placement, size, or characteristic of those solar parts. That's way broad. We have no idea what somebody is going to ask for. For your location restrictions, if you have a ground-mounted solar and you're 1,100 feet from Zeeb Road and 700 feet from Joy Road, why are you worried about somebody not being able to put their solar array between their house and the road? If it's 1,100 feet, it's not going to matter anyways. You're literally telling anybody who's on a corner you can't put your solar on 2 sides of their house. And maybe that's the best place. Maybe that's where the trees aren't blocking. Maybe that's closest so that they can actually get an actual array that works for them. Why are we as Webster making these rules for these people? In terms of screening, obviously you've already heard it. Nobody wants screening. Where is this coming from? Why are we doing it? in terms of the amount of screening, I agree. When you're looking at deciduous trees versus like non-native trees, where is this coming from? If it's aesthetic and it's not actually enforceable anyways, you are going to be increasing the number of lawsuits in this community. We are already spending way too much money on attorneys. And none of this works for anybody who wants to claim right to farm. Sorry. Right to farm. I have the right as a farmer to be able to get my energy. And you can't tell me that I can't have my solar panels. So now you're going to pit one house against another if they got enough farm to constitute right to farm. I find this absurd. And I don't like your whole planning commission waiver. Nobody should have to come to you guys and beg. Sorry. Let's make it reasonable. Let's make it easy to understand. Let's not put a whole group of people in the middle that somebody has to come up here and beg. And in terms of like not clapping, people really have a hard time getting up and speaking in front of you people. They're really worried about it. They're afraid of every board. So to give somebody a clap or a snap or a jazz hand, just to say they did a good job, that's kind of important, in my opinion. Thanks. Don't clap. Sorry, don't clap.
Would anybody else like to speak at this time? Seeing no others, we'll close the public comment section. Go on to the planning commission report. 3.
ZA.
Planning and zoning report. Aren't you the town planner?
So I just got off guard. I thought I heard planning commission report. I did have a couple of things I wanted to add, which I want to include in my ZA report because I did, at the last meeting I did mention I will summarize as much as I can remember of things that are in the pipeline or I've started discussions with people just so you're aware. 2 items I did briefly talked about it last time. We have 2 special use permits that are out there, one for the Loch Alpine Clubhouse, and then there's the other one for Cobblestone Farms, the riding stables. The Cobblestone Farm riding stables have been purchased by neighbor next door, and I've had a couple of meetings with them. They said they don't have any intention of continuing the use. They would like to split that and use that for single-family residential. Not a subdivision with just a couple of splits. So what I suggested to them is that just to take care of, revoke the special use permit or make a request to revoke the special use permit so that it's not just hanging out there for no reason. The same thing goes to Loch Alpine Clubhouse. I've been getting calls from their real estate agent and a couple of interested parties to understand what are the potential reuse for that location, and I couldn't able to track down an approval that was issued for Loch Alpine Clubhouse to come into existence from the aerial images and such. It looks like that may have been built around early 2000s or something, so according to the ordinance at the time, that must have required a special use permit. So that's a recommendation I made to the real estate agent representing the seller too, that maybe revoke that special use permit and start fresh rather than trying to figure out how to amend it. Just an update on that. The land division ordinance, I know we started the discussion on that one, and then we had one subcommittee review team meeting, not subcommittee, sorry, review team meeting. So what I did was I summarized all my findings in a tabular form, and then I forwarded that to the subcommittee, just so you guys have a picture of how far I worked, where I stopped. And propose it forward, you have my notes and my comments and the summary of the discussion. And then I also wanted to talk about, if you recall, back in 2025-ish, when we were talking about the non-conforming uses and the structure section, considering maybe administrative approval for non-conforming structure expansions. At that time, that was a discussion that prompted by a ZBA variance, but at the same time, I also pointed out in my memo some revisions to the section in general, other way, to provide some clarity and make it less restrictive. I just wanted to just remind you that, you know, the memo is hanging out there if you ever decide to pursue that. I've had some residents make similar comments where I told them that we did talk about it briefly about that. And going back to the Land Division Act again, at the last meeting packet, I've included references for the recent amendment. I guess not so recent, because it was amended in March 24, 2020. It is recent. 2026, where it would increase the number of lot divisions using Land Division Act from 4 to 10. It is optional right now. Communities may adopt an ordinance to allow additional lot splits, but on March 24, 2027, that law will become, the 10 for 10 splits will become effective, and communities no longer have an option. The number of lots that are available to split are automatically increased. But that amendment does not override zoning requirements. So a 10-acre parcel may not get 10 lots because our minimum lot size requirement is 2 acres. But I just wanted to bring your attention to that matter, to make sure you consider that when you talk about land division, because that will increase density. And if we don't plan how to address the density, the growth can be out of control. Okay, I think that was it. Is there any other comments or questions you may have based on what's included in my report? I'm happy to answer.
Commissioners?
Just have one thing. I appreciate this table. I like it very much. It's very helpful to have an overview. Under the ongoing and ordinance amendments of the planning commission for number 2, that review team meeting was canceled, so we did not meet for large-scale solar. So
You may have missed that, yes. We
We
did
don't have
cancel
an
every
update.
meetings for
Yeah,
the last
that
couple
was
of weeks, yes.
Anything else, commissioners, for Sri? Seeing none, we're zoning enforcement report. This is page 11 of 31. Does anybody have any insight on what's on this report? Besides the numbers?
Page 12 has the table, right?
Does it
12 of
match
30.
this? Does it match what's on the front? We know.
I don't know. Chuck provides that, I just included.
Okay. Well, seeing as there's nothing we can do with that, thank you very much. Jeffrey, board meeting, most of us were there last night. Would you like to add?
Yeah, well, most of you were there. Just a couple of things. The resolution for the attorney attendance at ZBA passed. Let's see what else. The amendment to the zoning ordinance for compliance permit procedure passed. Resolution for adopting the zoning amendment data center and battery storage passed. And special meetings for township supervisor procurement on the 30th of June. That is going to be like the interview process, and the 14th of July is selection. And those are public meetings. Private road ordinance was postponed. There was a draft enforcement policy, that was, we were gonna wait to have Chuck there. That's about it, no.
Let me just add one update.
Go ahead.
So the compliance permit procedure, board made two minor changes to the draft that was forwarded to them. One was, we talked about maybe having staking inspections to be optional. That was revised to make that all staking inspections are required. And then the other change was more, there was one point where we said that other information may be required. That one was a little bit of an example was provided for that item. I will be sharing the updated resolution of ordinance with those changes with the PC.
Any questions for Jeff?
I have a comment. So also yesterday at the board meeting, my name came up as a temporary replacement for zoning administrator to review permits. Now, I spoke at the other meeting regarding that, said I would consider that opportunity, and they wanted a planning commissioner who's familiar with the ordinance to temporarily take that duty, as I understood it.
Yeah, that's one thing I didn't mention.
I did say I would consider it, talked to my wife about it, so 24 hours has passed, I've talked to my family about it. They did remind me of many events we have this summer. I look at what a professional zoning administrator takes, how long it might take them to do the work in a week. Let's say it takes 10 hours to do zoning administration permit, just draw a number. For someone inexperienced in that process, it take at least double, triple that time. And as a temporary person doing that, I can't say there's a learning curve, because there isn't a learning curve. It takes 2 to 3 months to complete that learning curve, and here's 2 or 3 months of learning. So given that it would take that much of my time, 20 to 30 hours a week, I respectfully decline that opportunity. And I would suggest that the board hire a temporary zoning professional who would only take 10 hours a week to do that task. This is my opinion, that you consider that rather than a planning commissioner who would have to spend a lot of time learning as well as doing the planning commission job. I didn't mean to do any harm to the township by delaying it 24 hours, but I think 24 hours has passed, and I looked at how that would affect my family. There's a lot of time involved in that 2 to 3 months, and you're in the middle of summer. It might be different if this was January through March. So, unless some other planning commission wants to step forward and take the opportunity, that's my feeling, how much work that would take.
So the last thing was the procurement process, and we had talked about getting several members from the planning commission, several from the ZBA, and several board members to work on a committee to figure out that process.
Yeah, we asked specifically to identify 2 people for that.
Are you looking for it now?
I didn't think we were, because we needed to, there was 3 steps, and step 1 was figuring out what we want people to look for.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
but people can think about it if you want to.
Anything else from the board? Seeing none. ZBA report, Rick?
All right, on June 2nd, we had a request for variance. The zoning board of appeals had a request for a variance on a parcel on 7685 Huron River Drive. And what the people wanted was there's a non-conforming, legal non-conforming structure. And the reason it's legal non-conforming is it was legal when it was built, but the increased setback on Hare River Drive, so it created the non-conforming. And in this addition, they were planning on putting on the second floor, so they were not increasing the footprint of the building at all. And although our zoning ordinance says you can't expand a non-conforming structure, but anyway, the ZBA granted their request to build an addition on the second floor of this house without increasing the footprint at all. So that was granted.
Any questions, comments for Rick? Anything we want to send back to the ZBA? No? Thank you, sir. Appreciate your input and updates. PDR report. We have a copy in our packet. Did anything come up in anybody's review of that?
There was a,
No, last night at the board,
yeah, there was a note last night at the board that PDR application passed, so they're looking at funding.
For the one that is mentioned in the report?
2246. Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else for the PDR, for the board report last night? Seeing none, we move on to Natural Features Committee report.
Two big things. We're excited. I hope you noticed those beautiful native pocket gardens in the front of the township. So we had 15 community members of all ages out there planting, preparing the soil and planting the plants. This is from the community grant that Webster Township got from the Washtenaw County Conservation District. So it was on June 6th, the same day the Historical Society had an event. So they had a chance to talk to a lot of people, and we're pretty excited about it, and it'll be watered and taken care of. So the second thing is, for over a year, we've been working on creating content and reviewing it and thinking about, for natural features, what do people in Webster Township want to know about natural features? If they're looking for a place to figure out, how do I get rid of something and make it a prairie, or how do I learn about something? So we have created a new page on the Webster Township website that has this natural features information. And I will send an email with the links for you, but you can find it on the township page under community. If you, on the top border, you can find it there, or you can go to the Natural Features Committee page and link there. So, so we're very happy about that. We're not done yet, so if there are comments, we welcome comments. We're not finished with all the content. We had a photo contest. We're going to add some photos. So we're still probably another 6 months on that, but we got something up there.
Thanks, Kate.
I got it up here too.
Pardon? Thank you. Thank you. That's the introductory page, and then over to the left, there's 4 other pages with 4 different categories.
That's a nice lake. Is that in Webster Township?
Which one? This
Send it
one?
down.
That's it. Okay. Maybe we should start a lake committee and go lake like that. Anything, any comments, questions for Kate? Seeing none, thank you, Kate. We do not have any public hearings tonight, but we do have old business, which is small solar. Sri, would you please bring us up to date on where we were based on our last meeting?
I don't think that I don't recall PC made any major changes to the draft. For the most part, it was the, sorry, I'm revising something. For the most part, the discussion was pretty basic. The Planning Commission has deferred discussion until after the public hearing. From what my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that the Planning Commission wanted to understand the comments about screening requirements, the pros and cons, and want to hear from the public, and then revisit the standards to review the draft language. I did want to just, why it all started, as you all know, there are existing screening standards. The standards that are in there are not being proposed. The current screening standards are restrictive, which was realized during the ZPA variance review, and that was brought to your attention. And the intent when this thing was started was to reduce the restrictive nature of it and make it a little bit feasible. I did hear the comments. If you Planning Commission wants any clarification on any of the comments regarding the aesthetic zoning, I'm happy to address, provide some more context on that. And then, but I also heard a comment regarding the 20 feet measure. I think that was a good comment. We do have the definition for the building height, that it is measured from finished grade at the center of the building. So there is a method of how to measure the height. And I think the comment made by the resident is valid, that we did say it's 20 feet above ground, but we didn't kind of provide clarity as how is it measured, where is it measured. With that, I think I'm available with, the usual, the way we work, if you wanted to go section by section, and I'm happy to provide context and clarity.
Subcommittee members, I am torn on this. When we proceed. Sri's last day is tomorrow. We can go through it and sort of put it in the title. One of the comments, conversations we had before this meeting started that I suggested was, and no offense to Sri, but if we have comments like this, or there's other research to do in other communities, that the subcommittees, any of our subcommittees, can continue to gather that information and revise and be ready to move whenever we get somebody in that position. Would this fall into that, in your opinion? Or we put it on hold?
So I think we sought guidance from MSU Extension. They have extensive guidance. And as Sri mentioned, we looked at, I think, 3 different recently updated residential zoning ordinances for solar. So we did do some research, and we had done research previously, but all this was updated now.
Right.
So I think if we did more research, it would need to be focused on specific topics that we had questions about. I don't think we can just do a general thing.
I agree, but my point is on the topics that came up from the public tonight. If there's things to look at and revise, typically that would be the planner who would do more of that language work. That being the case, if there's nobody there, we're sort of stuck in neutral if we rely on that. On the other hand, as you said, we do have research, we do have background. Can we continue to consider that input on our own? I am of the opinion that we can.
It would still be helpful to sort of talk about it today and understand sort of if we can sort of group the input so that we can focus and not just have this.
That's from, I don't disagree, I'm just looking for the commissioner's input before we dive in or not.
I'll give some input.
If I may, I'm here today, so if there's anything you can make the best of my time today, I'm happy to answer questions. But even before anybody, me or anybody go back and try to work on the draft, there is definitely a very obvious question the residents have raised the planning commission should address
Right.
with regards to screening. Without addressing that question, there's no guidance as what to go back and revise.
I get that.
Right, so the question for the planning commission is why is screening required? How would you, and what are the parameters? And, yeah.
Well, somebody pointed out, and I agree with them, if I'm in a subdivision,
Okay.
or even not in a HOA subdivision, but more closely, excuse me, packed in houses, then if your neighbor starts complaining, you have an issue. On the other hand, I also agree that if I want a farm and it's over there, who's really looking? And really, should anybody be caring? So, you know, in my view, that's the number one topic that I would get after tonight.
As a member of the subcommittee, I'm not saying some words here. So, I was around when this was written, so was Kay, part of it in 2019. A lot of the context here isn't changed. There is some, well, obviously there's an addition to what we did regarding the one landowner who had the issue at the ZBA, and that's been taken care of. I've heard the residents, when we wrote this, when the township wrote it originally, we had input from a variety of township residents. I don't believe we have input from small landowners and subs or in developments present today. I can't guarantee it, but I've heard a lot of large landowners out in the rural area comment. Changes, you know, coming from an engineering background, when you make changes, you should base it on data and facts. When you I have a lot of experience in engineering, when changes are made on opinion, things went sour, things really got ugly in industry when you were caught making changes on opinion. And this, as a planning commissioner, we have made changes on opinion and had to backtrack and change back in the past. When you look at the comments from the citizens today, I can address many of them. Regarding screen, let's just stay with screen. So I did look at other townships in Livingston and Washington County. The thing about looking at other townships' ordinances is you can't always find what you're looking for. Because I find some ordinances and they were silent and solar, period. I didn't have time to go and search around, but it had to be in there somewhere. I just want to spend an hour looking for it. But I did find townships who had screening requirements for solar. Similar to ours, one thing about this planning commission is, and it's self-inflicted, is we are very detailed on our language, and it's always because we question ourselves about is it enforceable. So it becomes very detailed. All the ordinances I found that talk about screening solar, ours is by far the most detailed of the ones that I found. I got examples, I'm not going to read the to get 500 responses like it is in that last master plan, we put a question in our master plan regarding this topic. Aimed the question at small scale solar, you want screening, don't you want screening, just put the answers in there. No screening, yes screening, some degree of screening. And then we'll have data from the entire township saying, don't need it, then we can get rid of it. We need it, then we can adjust it or keep it. But don't make decisions based on opinion. And what we're missing is that data. I did ask Shree before the last meeting, did she ever have an applicant come in, request a permit for solar, and then when they found out they needed screening, rescind that application for permit? She said no.
There was one who shifted to rooftop, but no.
Okay. I'm going to finish this with a thought here. I found this ordinance. And I want you, as planners, just think about why did this township write this ordinance statement? Okay? This township does not require screening. They just say, put the solar equipment in the least visibly obtrusive location. They have this statement: when the solar energy collection system is installed on a lot, accessory structures or vegetation on an abutting lot shall not be located so as to block the solar collector's access to solar energy. Talk about government overreach. So that is essentially says, if George puts a solar array next to my property, the property I have next to the solar array I can't use for a structure, for landscaping or anything. Why did that township do that? And then call and ask them, here's my opinion. They had some spiteful neighbor who put up a building or trees blocking this array, this $25,000, $30,000 array, whatever they cost. Now that landowner's array is useless. What our ordinance does is it makes the owner of that solar array screen their property so that the neighboring landowner doesn't screen it up. This is unbelievable. And I saw this in this township and another one. I didn't copy those. I came across them like the second day because I'd already got it. That's what you don't want to run into. If we totally eliminate screening, it's no surprise to people on this commission if there's spiteful neighbors in this township. There's spiteful neighbors in every township. And if you're bound to have somebody that does this. What would this township do if they came across that occurrence? Write an ordinance like this? So, when you write ordinances, you got to look at the impact of how is that going to impact the property owner who has the solar array, and how is it going to affect the neighbors? So, before you wipe out, before you throw the baby out with the bathwater, as my parents used to say, think about what the current ordinance provides and prevents from happening in the township. But back to I think we need data. Nobody needs data for the master plan survey. And you can put this on hold until you get the data. If it says nobody wants them, okay, get rid of them. But be prepared for what this township has to do. Regarding some of the other comments, we rely on our legal team to look at everything we write. And in the 25 years I've been here, I've had developers threaten lawsuits, people threaten lawsuits on what we've written. That's not uncommon. So that's why we have our lawyers look at our document. Other townships have screening measures in place. So it doesn't bother me about is it legal. So other people do it, we did, our lawyer looked at it. Regarding why do we ask for the energy output, right? Why don't we listen to DTE to it? So once again, as a planning commission, think forward. So 3 years from now, and this is just speculation, 3 years from now, when all the data centers come online, and there's saying you can use they're saying charge your car during low cost time and feed it back to the system during high cost time and make money. So you gotta look to the future. Is that a possibility where DP would relax that requirement and say, we're gonna let homeowners put solar panels up as many as they want to feed the system to help us out to build power plants? So it's in there. Does it do any harm? No, it doesn't do any harm. So you want to leave that requirement in there in case in the future something happens like that. The other, regarding, a lot of the language is very common language from township to township about how the panels look on a wall, how they look on the roof, how they look on the ground. We didn't create unique language for those things. We just copied what industry standards are and the EA says they do. So that's why it's there. That's just a historical perspective for folks who haven't been keeping up with meetings.
What do you think of the idea of tabling it until we get a little more data?
I like the idea for tabling it. Just, there's a few situations that I think we need to look at. And as we said, whether or not we could have more specific language in there. If it's an open space, a larger open space, I think we need to look at that. I tend to agree with some of the stuff, but solar panels don't bother me. So, I mean, the argument if it's on the ground or if it's on your roof, it's a solar panel. I mean, there are certain situations that I would not want people planting trees to block the solar panel, especially if they're gonna get big and then block my view of everything else, because they had to do it. So I think we should look at specific or other situations, and I agree, table it. Let's get some more information and let's have a little bit of discussion on it.
For all of your edification, he was referring to the master plan that currently is in place. We will be in the process of starting a new master plan process in about 6 to 8 months. So with the plan to finish it next year. That being the case, things like this will be part of that. And also in that same vein, to Paul's comment, one of the things that has happened in the township since I got involved in all of this is that it is becoming a more diverse township. And that's one of the challenges that we as a planning commission have, not only with this, but all of our ordinances. Folks who've lived here traditionally and have larger tracts, I'm in agreement with you. I don't understand. I get it. Put your solar thing and be done. But on the other hand, you drive down Joy Road, all of a sudden 10 houses are popping up over there, and 10 over there. And the last time around, there were many, not as many. I believe there was only 1 or 2 subdivisions at that point in the township. Those voices back then were predominantly this side of town. And we don't know what the other folks think. So I agree. I think we should table and get the data. Yes, Kate.
I have one suggestion and one comment. My suggestion is, as a starting point for thinking about those different situations where it might not be required, that's what we tried to do for the waiver conditions. So even if we don't want to have a waiver, if you look at those, maybe it gets you started thinking about what are those conditions where it's just not useful or practical.
Right.
So that's my suggestion. And then my comment is, so if we just defer this now, our current ordinance is much stricter than this about screening. So I just want to highlight that. So that means what?
Only other option is to send it through as is,
Yeah.
and then change it later when the data comes in.
Yeah.
Because you're right, the change that we made to that one landowner, hopefully tabled.
Yeah.
another thing you folks need to know. Everybody gets excited about an ordinance like it's never could change and it never can change, and that's not the case. They're not locked in stone, they're not immutable. As Paul said, that's why we revisit them, whether or not there's a master plan revision. So,
Do we currently have any solar arrays permits?
No, they've definitely gone down since the tax deadline has passed.
So we don't have any right now?
I got a couple things. I was also here in 2019 when this current ordinance went into effect. It was written based on basically best practices at that time, which included public comment. And at that time, there was, I will say there's absolutely no pushback at that time like we've been getting for the past 6 months on this topic. Times have now changed, and we're trying our best to listen and to make the right decision. Where I'm going with this right now is we've had public comment, which, to let you all know, was from 2 people.
what do you mean the public hearing?
No. Public comment prior to the public hearing was 2 people. We then had the public hearing, which was very minimal. We then had last night at the board meeting, which we heard more last night, or I should say I heard more sitting in the back about citizens talking about this topic. And then tonight we hear about it. Well, prior to the public hearing, and then really after the public hearing, it was a 50-50 split on screening or no screening. If you look at last night and now you look at tonight, it's overwhelmingly no screening. I'm torn right now on this, in that we do want to have it be less restrictive, and what is the best way to go about this at this time. As Tom just said, ordinances can be changed if it's not the right decision. But we want things to be less restrictive because it's been made clear that as it was written in 2019 does not work in 2026. And I want to make a couple other comments that I previously said. The topic of 1,100 feet and 700 feet, I agree that we'll just stipulate to say a 10-yard solar panel that is 1,100 feet and 700 feet off the road. A 10-yard solar panel from that vision looks a lot different than a 10-yard solar panel at 20 feet off the road. And I have to go back to the tape to see what exactly I said, but the point I was making is, and I may have even said something about a magnifying glass, to be able to actually see what you're looking at, okay? So, long and short of what I'm saying, it's not our intent to make this read as if it was an HOA ordinance. That is not the intent. We also received, and I'm going to talk about, and I thought about that for the last few hours. We received an email today from a citizen, and I put it out as, or I heard it, I read it as a sponge. And what it basically said was, Michigan sunlight is not the same as Florida sunlight or Arizona sunlight. Therefore, if you have screening, that solar panel is not being efficiently, it's not efficiently capturing, efficiently capturing the sunlight because our sun in Michigan is not as intense as it is in Florida or Arizona, okay? Again, without researching that statement, I'm just right now going to say, well, that statement sounds logical to me. Okay, so then I said, all right, let me take a sponge, a true water sponge. Let me put it right here. and then let me put a few other little sponges around it. Well, the few little sponges are gonna absorb some of that water that's coming at it, so that the big sponge is not gonna become maximally full of water because of the little sponges. Well, if we look at what I think what overall is being talked about screening, assuming that it's accurate, that the screening can absorb some of the sun at some part of the day, well, our intent, or my intent would be, is to have that great big sponge absorb it 100%. So that the money that's being spent, whether it's $25,000, $30,000, or $100,000, so that that money on that great big sponge can best serve the property owner for why they want that property, and why they want that solar panel in the first place. We don't want to be restrictive on maximizing the ability of the sponge to absorb the water. So, going back to what should we do right now, I don't think we should table it, because in the event we have applications that come in, yes, because of the tax incentives expiring, it was predicted that it would go down. It was predicted that applications would go down. And how do we, so the question is without tabling it, how do we deal with applications, even though they may be few and far between, so that they are not burdened by the current ordinance until we modify how it's currently written?
Well, you got two things, George. Either accept it as is, or put a clause, strict clause you put into it saying this doesn't apply until a certain point in time, where it may apply to the landowner. Can't do something like that. Regarding screen, they're
That
gonna do something
might
like screen
be-
only.
That might be tricky. I think I would recommend probably adopt in some form that's acceptable for now, with the intent to revise it when we get additional input. I don't, because I think what Kay and George pointed out is also, like if somebody comes in now, even though the frequency has gone down and there is an issue with screening, they cannot, they have to go to ZBA for a variance. And so that's one, so that is very restrictive. That's the whole reason why we were trying to take that away from the ZBA and give it to Planning Commission, because going to ZBA involves a cost, and it involves a very fixed standards of review based on hardship. By taking that variance authority from ZBA and directing it to Planning Commission, there is no cost for the applicant, and then the Planning Commission standards are very subjective, taking into consideration that there are going to be unique situations where it doesn't sound feasible or required. So that would be my advice if you've, and I think there are definitely, wanted to say this before, I know it's kind of related, but if I may, Tom, can I think it comes down to Kay's favorite word, rationale. Any standard, any zoning standard that the Planning Commission works on, it's just my 2 cents, for any text amendment works on, has to be tied to how that serves the purpose of, you know, the intent of a zoning ordinance, serving public health, welfare, and other factors, and how that aligns with master plan. If the rationale for why you're adopting your screening standard is justified and supported by those 2 guidelines, then that standard holds value. Which is, I had the landscape ordinance pulled, because that is a ordinance that is entirely focused on screening ordinance, and that talks about why screening is required, why Webster Township would like screening for certain users. It summarizes coming down to mitigate visual impacts and maintain compatibility between land uses. What is a visual impact? What is compatibility? Those are good questions that, like Paul suggested, to ask during master plan, because those are two very subjective terms. It's good to get input from, rest of the township as what that means. What is the purpose of screening? What is the planning commission trying to achieve by asking for screening standards? So that's just a high level item. I just wanted to make sure you all hear when we work on master plan. And then coming back to the question, you cannot date when it's effective, like, the state acts were. You would have to adopt it in some form that will be effective now with the intent that it will be revised.
I have an idea, and I don't know if it's possible or not. If we agree that our enforcement policy in this township is complaint-based, that we're not actively walking around going, he's got it. Should we make the screening portion of this something to review X number of years after the solar has been installed and or complaint-based? Because in here, we talk about trees at a certain height over a certain period of time. Certain trees grow at different rates. So I go, well, I've got a fast-growing something or other, and the deer didn't eat it, whatever. So do you wait and then go, oh, by the way, it's not doing its job? Or we haven't heard any complaints from anybody, don't worry about it.
So are you saying take the new version or the current version?
Take what makes screening conditional based on those two things. Have we had complaints? And if so, it's retroactive as opposed to upfront.
I don't know that we can do that.
I don't think so.
And that's one of the reasons why I have an issue with screening in general, is you could have a row of trees and they die. And then 5 years, 10 years later down the road, you don't have a row of trees. And I mean, we've all driven around the township. Sure. We all know that there are solar panels that don't have any screening. And that's part of the issue, is the longevity of that.
But you also, the other side of it, I plant them now because I've got trees planted there and the trees die, and now they're visible because the trees died and I cut them down.
Right.
Now you've got it just in reverse.
But you've always got a bunch of different options too. But I agree with what George said. But if we were to look at passing this and go on and not put it off, I would like to see something that we revisit it, and it's in our notes that we revisit it, because I don't want it to fall off the table.
Well, we have to revisit it. If we
Yeah,
start
I mean,
doing that to survey,
once we get the survey, that we actually have it in our records that we are revisiting it, and it goes like into the table.
Just wanted to clarify, I'm not suggesting either way, I'm just providing you data.
Sure.
It's your call whether.
You get talking about the planning commission grant a variance to them. I didn't think that the planning commission, I thought only the ZBA can plan.
Planning commission grant a waiver.
It's a waiver.
Waiver. So not a variance, because ZBA variances are very hardship based, and so what I was saying is the ordinance is trying to do is taking the ZBA authority from ZBA to grant a variance for screening requirements, not the authority of granting a variance. I see where the confusion happened. No, ZBA still has the authority to grant a variance, but in this particular situation, for an applicant rather going to ZBA to get a variance from screening requirements, it is easier to come to planning commission and ask for a waiver. I see what you do. No, that's a state given authority. Stays with ZBA.
And the waiver is basically the situations where it doesn't make sense to
Right.
have screening. Either it's not feasible,
Right.
or it's impossible,
Right.
or it just doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And that's what's the waiver description
Right, to be more specific, I'll give you a hypothetical example. Okay, we have a 2-acre parcel. We used the same example when we were talking about keeping our animals too. So we have a 2-acre parcel, no physical constraints, there are no wetlands, there are no topography conditions, no physical constraints that what typically a variance is looking at. You know, what is your hardship, why are you not able to provide screening? There are no constraints, but that 2-acre parcel is surrounded by a PDR easement. For a ZBA, that is not one of the factors they are required to consider. But the Planning Commission can consider that factor and say, you're surrounded by PDR, there are nobody who's going to be impacted with lack of screening, so you don't have to screen. That subjective discretion, ZBA doesn't have. Planning Commission has, and you can, with the amendment, set the parameters and the guidelines as what can be, reviewed when you're allowing that. You don't have wetlands, you can definitely screen, it's only a financial thing, but there's no point of screening because you're surrounded by PDR. You're not impacting anybody's visual.
Yeah, but doesn't that have to be stated in,
It is. It is. I think that's where the Planning Commission never discussed that in great detail, but the review team discussed it in 2.5 hours, more than 3 hours. We went, we zoomed in, zoomed out on various parcels on the map Washna, and then we looked at various situations where, oh, this doesn't make sense for this parcel, and then we went back and then came up with the language that's in your draft that talks about those situations.
So basically, we can look at an individual proposal and
Right.
case by case.
No fee.
Evaluate.
Yeah.
No fee.
Yeah, no fee. And we have more discretion.
Right, so we have 5 standards. The review team came up, recommended 5 standards that are based on abutting undevelopable land. You know, there's existing screening that's out there, conflicts with wetlands, size and shape of lot, and then we also talked about that there are lots which are narrow and long. How much, it's unfair, it's burdensome for a resident to expect that they're going to screen the entire depth of the lot. And then also, the screening doesn't necessarily mean it has to be planted within 10 feet of a solar panel. It can be planted farther along the property line too, or in a location where it can be screened. So that section is what acts as your standards of review when you're looking at a waiver to allow flexibility.
Okay, commissioners. Do we want to go through it and make any modifications based on the input tonight, or let it stand?
Any significant modifications, she's no longer around.
I understand that, that's why I mentioned that earlier.
It's created a lawyer, reviewed this in its current form.
Oh, I'm sorry?
Has the lawyer reviewed this in its current form?
Sorry, jogging.
Thought we were waiting.
I thought we were waiting.
That's what asked the question.
Yeah.
I did too.
No, lawyer didn't
Yeah.
review it because the Planning Commission never discussed the language in great detail, as you usually do.
I would like to send that to the lawyer then in this form. Can you do that before you leave?
I can, do you want to talk about it before we send it to the attorney, or? Because usually the idea is that we send it to the attorney when you all agree on the language in there.
I'd like to send it. And
I would still send it if that's what the Planning Commission, so I can
I'll tell you why,
forward it.
because we can throw everything in the pot at once. I mean, it's going to get delayed, but at least we have their input, we have our input, we've had a public hearing on it. We can sort of stir the stew with all the pieces. And guys okay with that? Or you were going to say something?
Yeah, Shriek, it's an administrative question, but, just, excuse my ignorance, but will the office have access to all your documents?
Yeah, they're all on the server.
Okay, so thus, it can be manipulated by
Yeah.
those of us that have expertise in.
All you need to.
It took typing in high school.
This side of the room.
I don't know.
George, he just said he wanted his summers.
Yes, all the research, all the PDFs, all the figures, everything is on the server. Anybody wants to log in.
Then if you would get this to the lawyer in this form, to whom do they respond?
I will copy you on it so you would be getting
Okay.
the response.
Thank you. And then we've got their input, I've got a list, we can go through their list, we can look at the lawyer's comments, you know, like, it's 12 inches over the edge, forcible. I don't know. Sorry. Go ahead.
Are you thinking about postponing to the next meeting?
Yes.
And getting the lawyer's comments?
In between.
Talk about.
Correct.
And then we'll talk about it again, because again, so this is,
That's what I just said.
it won't get
So-
done yet.
I understand that, but we have input from every quarter. We can put it in the stew, stir it up, and then spend the time going through it line by line. I know that's not our usual way of doing it, but we're in unique circumstances.
Edge question. This is for Mr. Sharp, if you don't mind me asking my question.
Mr. Sharp, are you awake?
I am.
Did the tax forms go out yet?
Not yet.
Could
Oh,
we-
they've gone to the printer. They haven't gone to the post office.
That means you can't add anything to the.
No, I can't.
No.
Good idea.
Good idea, yeah.
In your case, I'd make an exception though.
What, if I take the ZH on?
Okay, we okay with doing that, folks? I know it's atypical, but that's a good idea.
You look for a motion, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah. There's no motion drafted here, but somebody wanted to make one up. I'm not supposed to.
George, you seem always poised to say something.
Boys?
Just thinking about something else.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll make it. I'll do it, I got you. I propose postponing a draft discussion on small-scale solar system 26-ZTA-01 until attorney feedback, and we can revisit this at the July meeting.
Till
The next scheduled meeting, the next scheduled meeting.
Second.
Julie, second. Discussion. Roll call. Okay,
I'm sorry,
roll call.
what?
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries. Thank you, public, for your input. On the new business, we changed this a little bit. The last night's board meeting, George might, you're George, he's.
Is there a Parkinson?
I get confused,
We both have voices that care.
is that what it is? Both songs, voices.
That's why I sit back here.
Okay. Am I correct that the last night's board meeting, the moratorium did pass, correct?
That is correct. For data centers.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So we have our marching orders that we can now,
Yes, we do.
thank you. That being said, go ahead.
I ask a question about the timing. So we had the police ordinance that went in, and now we have the zoning ordinance. So when does the moratorium start? Does it start now with the second one? Or does it start with the first one?
It started with the first one, the second one made it more stronger.
It's just reinforced.
But what's it says 1 year. When does the 1 year start?
So again, it would be the same, I was thinking about the same thing last night. So the reason why we're doing between two different modes is to make it more defensible. So we would essentially have a moratorium that's probably 1 year, 1 month longer. It's just that both moratoriums will have a common period of effectiveness in between, but there will be a month that the police ordinance is effective, and then there will be 1 month at the end where the zoning ordinance will be effective. But the zoning ordinance moratorium was just approved. We're going to send it to publication next week, and it takes 7 days for that to be effective from the date of publication. So technically, the zoning ordinance moratorium still has 2 more weeks for it to be
It's
effective.
basically July 1st.
But you have the police code ordinance effective already.
Thank you.
So, I would like to form tonight a subcommittee for the data centers, even though we might not have a next scheduled meeting. Because in my humble view, that doesn't mean that we can't go to MTA as a subcommittee or look at other ordinances that have been put in place in other townships and see what's worked or what hasn't. My whole purpose in all of this, even though we're in an, again, unique situation, is not to lose momentum and not to lose focus. Because, I mean, I'm just speaking for myself. If I go on vacation, I mean, at one time in my career, I had enough time to have 2 weeks vacation. And I went down to the beach in North Carolina. And it took me way too long to get back into the swing of things when I came back to the office. I don't want us to have that same thing happen. When, like Paul would go out, I got to suffer off, I don't have to think about anything. They come back and they go, oh, is that not what he said? Oh, I know.
I'm sorry, I spoke.
He wants a summer, he wants a summer, I get it. Yeah. But, you know, when we come back, we're gonna go, oh, what were they talking about? At least if we continue to have conversations, it might be not front and center and top of mind, but we're not gonna get lost and lose that momentum. And that's my hope, in whatever way we can do it.
How many people are you looking at?
I think 2.
You look at page 8.
Pardon me?
You look at page 8 of K's, or Shree's matrix, K and I are already on that page.
What?
Yeah. Did I write it by mistake?
I don't actually remember discussing it.
I don't.
I might have copied that and
No, I don't believe that you guys are already on it. I know that.
I think,
Hey, it works for me.
no, it was just, I think what happened was you provided a copy of draft ordinance from another community, and then that's when we were working on the large-scale solar system that was battery energy. And I don't know, I have to go back to the minutes to review, but that's what my recollection.
No, see, I highlighted it for just every, it's like, wait a minute. Well, I would like to be on that subcommittee.
I see my role, my name there to you.
You okay? You guys okay with us?
I'm good with both of you.
You know that.
Really?
Yeah, really.
Yeah, very good.
Is Kate doing up data center too, or on the data center storage?
Yeah.
Well, we could do both, I think they're complementary.
Center
Yeah.
and battery.
No, 2. All of them. Kate is ceding her position. CED.
I'm happy to have Tom be on that too, with Paul. So the review team is Tom and Paul for data centers and battery storage.
I've got a number of friends who are down in Saline, and they're very happy to give me input. Okay. That being the case, we do have that. Are there any other subcommittees on that same topic who can continue to do something during this lull in our action?
point of clarification, is the review team you just formed, is it to address data centers?
And battery centers.
And they're two separate topics though.
Right, well, they're complementary. Only because when we were down there, this is, follow you farmers, you can do
Data
this.
centers are used.
If you go down to the Saline thing, one of the great things that I think the two farmers are doing between the battery storage and the data center, they refuse to sell their property or give them rights away. And so they're getting a really nice chunk of change for a cable running between their two farms, going from the battery storage to the data center. Because they didn't give it up, and it's like, yes. Well, sorry, I should not.
They are
I'm
consistent.
not to do that.
The only reason why I just asked for clarification is because battery energy storage systems are being used by data centers, but they're
Right.
also being used by large-scale solar
Right.
systems. And battery energy storage systems are regulated under PA 233 Act. Data centers are not regulated by any act. So I just wanted to make sure that that distinction is there, so.
I've got both their phone numbers, we can talk.
I think large-scale solar, Paul and I can meet. We were looking for and found an excellent map that Tree had prepared when we were talking about keeping of animals. We have that map, and we have the guidance documents, and we have the 3 questions that the Planning Commission asked us back in January. So we believe we can come, so this is not creating an ordinance, this is answering the questions that the Planning Commission gave us and making recommendations for those answers. We can do that.
Okay. Any other subcommittees that are working right now? No, we've got our land division, but that's sort of on hold. And you heard earlier, any of you internally who get this fine little magazine, it was mentioned earlier by 3 of you, they actually talked about the March 27th deadline. I'm increasing the land division from 4 to 10. So we need to be cognizant of that and think about that going forward too. I mentioned master plan earlier, but maybe I'm premature on that. Because we don't have a board in place, and they're the next ones who are supposed to be doing something. Well, maybe we should put that on hold and not just wait till we get something from the board. Okay. I don't have anything else. So if we move on to B on the meeting schedule under new business. Do we have a meeting in July to give subcommittee updates?
Yeah, lawyer, but
Well, that's it. We'll have the lawyer input. You and I make a couple calls and have some conversations, which I'm sure we can. You guys might have another conversation and you say you do have some things you're looking at, so I think we've got an agenda for July, correct?
We'll have at least discussion.
Right, discussion, yeah. We all this momentum, okay, works for me. Other things I'm not, we can add this at the time, but I have it on my list based on what I heard last night. That is potential for PC member openings. Am I allowed to say anything? Okay. Well, for some people in the room have put their application in for supervisor. Don't know where that's going to go, but we may have an opening, which would be an appointment from the new supervisor. Not this group. We don't do that by ourselves, just for the edification of the room. We want to put that on the July schedule, or if we need to change the agenda in July, we add it at that time.
I would just say,
Okay. Got it, thank you.
So we have small scale solar, large scale solar, and what else?
Data centers.
Oh, data centers.
Data centers.
batteries.
I can't think of anything else, but, good discussion, we can keep it moving, and if things happen like we hope they do, we'll at least have some kind of resource going forward. Okay. That led into 17 accidentally, I didn't mean to jump around like that, but So we do have a meeting on July 22nd. Good. We now have an opportunity for additional public comment, if anybody would like to say anything.
Pat Schloss at 424 Road. So I really appreciate your all's thoughtful discussion tonight and taking into account citizens' comments. I would, I guess, just make 2 comments. So first of all, I encourage you not to table this because it's not just, I think, citing new solar arrays, but it's also the enforcement of the solar arrays. And I think there's concern when people start talking about whether or not there should be active versus complaint-driven enforcement. I mean, I think the difference is negligible, right? So if I'm a citizen, I can go around and file complaints and install the solar panels in the city of Neighborhood Township, right? And so, rightly or wrongly, I suspect people are paranoid about any type of enforcement, right? And so if there's people that are vocally against solar panels and worried about screening, that's a thing. So that would be an encouragement to act. I guess the second thing I would say is that I agree that data are good. I believe in data, but there's also good data and bad data. Just because you have data doesn't mean it's good data. And I look at the township and I can't help but see those blue-red election maps where Republicans always get torqued that people like Obama get elected when there's so much red, right? Like the centers, the population centers are on the periphery of our township in these big subdivisions. And so if you get feedback in your master plan for those big subdivisions, I don't want to discount what they're saying, but at the same time, like, they're not really part of the conversation because they've got an HOA. Grass Creek has its own stuff about solar panels, like Rotherwick and Loch Alpine, right? And so they're gonna and because they're on small lots, they're gonna put them on the roof anyway. They don't have to worry about screening. And so again, I would just be very careful that data is good. Not all data is good, and that it can be noisy, it can be biased in many different ways. And I'm sure it's professionally done, but judging from the number of people that I've jokingly gone up to and said, hey, are you going to be our next supervisor? And they look at me and have no clue what I'm talking about. Telling me we do not have a very engaged population who has an opinion on something like screening solar panels. So yes, data are good, but that doesn't mean that all data are good. Thank you.
For the edification of those of you out there who were not involved in the last master planning process, but I know you guys were because I saw you here, there were listening sessions that went on, and including time in this room with people at different stations. I don't know if the form will take the same, when we get a consultant who knows how to go. But there were charts all around the wall that were rolled up, put down, and those made of what people's desires, and the public notices went out all over God's Little Green Acre and said, come on over Friday afternoon at 3 o'clock or Saturday morning or whenever they were to allow people to provide that input in addition to the data. So that was sort of the umbrella under which the large chunks of information were being looked at and how we got there. And one of the ones that always sort of made me chuckle was nobody wanted to pave roads. I was like, really? So now we read on our Facebook Marketplace thing or whatever it is, paved roads or roads are horrible. Well, nobody wanted to pave roads. We got what you voted for. So anyway, that being said, I don't mean that as a political comment at all. Anybody else for public comment? Dave. Why are we not surprised?
I am not surprised. I was just looking up some other townships. My name is Dave Daly, 7223 Boulder. I was just looking up some other townships on solar arrays, and one of the things that one of them mentioned is that they're treated just like an accessory building. And I don't know why that wouldn't be how we treat it. You don't have the right to tell somebody that I don't like the shape of your barn that you're building in your backyard. You don't have the right to tell them that your storage shed isn't appealing to me. I don't know. It just had some other rules. You can't exceed 15 feet high. It can't be this, it can't be that, but it's an accessory structure. And it still has to meet all the setbacks that an accessory structure has to meet. So anyway, just food for thought. Thank you.
Good, thanks.
thank you for serving and doing this work. I don't know where you ended up on sort of tabling that. I mean, I kind of do, but it sort of seems like it still allows for time for input. I think the idea of data, I agree with you in terms of like not all data. So how you ask that question, you know, is going to be really important in sort of working on that question if you are going to ask people. The other thing, in looking at it, I did the same thing with the animal ordinance with my class. I'm kind of curious how many parcels are affected. Okay, like sort of looking at that. I did, in Hammer Township, they wanted to regulate trees that were 5 inches in caliber. I was like, that is nuts. Do you have any idea how many trees you have?
Yeah.
That are 5 inches in caliber. Okay. So one of the things is like looking at topography. You know, where's the south side? Okay, and those things, and sort of trying to understand how many properties are affected by whether they want to do it or not. So again, thank you.
Thank you. FYI, she is an expert.
I'm nothing.
No, no.
Zoning administration?
Yes, in planning. And she was put on to me by Mike. She's now semi-retired, she told me last week. And so maybe she has some resource that we should consider, or the board should consider, excuse me, not the planning commission. Sorry.
Peter Stevens, 7500 Travis Lane, just a few comments on the discussion. One of the first things that kind of pricked my ears up was the idea of any kind of subjective enforcement in this situation, even if that's subjective enforcement by this body. Subjective just doesn't have room in ordinance for people's lives. It's subjective. It means you're making a decision based on your opinions and ideals, not to live life of other people in their home and environment. Second, the comment from Mr. Zaluka about the spiteful neighbors putting up a structure to block the other neighbors' solar panels. I agree the language in that ordinance as it was, alluding to trying to regulate a neighbor's property and how it might affect the solar panels. Yes, that could be an issue, but I don't see how it would be a huge issue if there's proper setback guidelines within the ordinance, which isn't going to be an issue for anybody. People understand the importance of setbacks for these exact reasons. I think that would prevent you from getting into a case like Mr. Zaluka described. In the past, I know I have suggested one way to potentially get around the screening requirement in the ordinance is to add some kind of robust language around solar panels and the actual physical measurable lumens coming off of it from someone's property and inserting that somehow into the nuisance ordinance. That would allow property owners who have solar panels nearby and may have it shining directly into their house to actually make some kind of argument about why screening would be required because it's shining right into their home and disrupting their lives. Also, to the idea of the reporting to the township, the size of the solar panels and thinking about into the future, all of this is going to be hypothetical. Thinking about into the future and how that's going to be regulated by the state, especially with green energies. It's transforming quickly right now, especially with the advent of data centers coming into the areas, or into the area, but if people are going to get a solar system right now on their property, DTE will only build it up to 100% of the capacity for their average annual use. They will not build you a bigger system. They will not accept electricity from it. You can get money from getting more back, whatever, but that's already, as people have mentioned, regulated by the industry and by the state for that matter. So again, that just seems to me like the idea of getting more information from people at the township really doesn't need to happen. I couldn't see the use of figuring out what every single property's energy use is if it's legal for them to be doing that. Just a quick note, just for the record, I know people sometimes get sketchy about giving their names for whatever reason. For this body, I know that you guys are only asking people for their names because comments that they make. So, at least for this body, I would just encourage people to be very open about who they are so that they're represented properly in the minutes. With that, final comment, I'll share kind of what Chris said. Public speaking does not come naturally to everybody, even after years of doing it. People come up here, they get scared, they get embarrassed, they get anxious. A little bit of support from the crowd, a look from the members that you're actually paying attention to the person up here speaking instead of being on your telephone or something like that. It's very encouraging to the people to be able to hear something like that. So if that's something you want to say, we encourage people to snap, we encourage people to jazz hands if clapping is a little too disruptive, but please just recognize that it's trying to encourage the people that are coming up here to share their opinions and voices for you, which I would hope you would encourage as well. Thank you.
2 nights in a row.
Hi, I'm Sheila Polkowski, 2522 North Territorial Road, and I have a public speaking phobia, but I've been practicing all year because I've been attending the board meetings, I've been going to all the county commissioner meetings, I've been going to the road commission meetings, and I've been trying to speak everywhere, so I'm getting better. And I am a solar supporter. I'm not really a supporter of the big solar farms. I think they're kind of ugly. I just drove to the Kalamazoo County Road Commission meeting yesterday, and down 94, there are 3 gigantic solar farms on farmland now, and the scale of it is just unbelievable. But I think it's important to have solar on our homes. Now, I am recently retired, and that is because I had a medical retirement due to heavy metal poisoning. So I don't have a lot of money saved, and I would love to get solar sometime, because I have a lot of friends that are doomsday preppers, and I don't know if you know anything about doomsday, but times are kind of crazy right now. The whole world is fighting. America is fighting. I'm really worried about the next presidential election, what's going to happen, because I feel like no matter who wins, they're going to claim that the election was rigged. And we've had a civil war in America before. It was a long time ago. But what if it really happens again? The first thing that's going to happen is they're going to shut the phones off so no one can communicate. And then the next thing they're going to do is they're going to shut the power grid off. And if we don't have any power, how are we going to get our food? How are we going to keep our food cold? How are we going to eat? How are we going to survive? Statistics say 80% of the population is going to die within a month because no one will have clean water to drink. Most people are on wells. Your well isn't going to work. Now, I know this is kind of a dark story, but thinking if you had a solar panel, you might be able to survive. You might be able to run your well, or at least keep some food cold, or be able to cook. If you have a gas generator, it's not really going to help you because you're not going to be able to go to the gas station and get gas. And even if you have a Generac generator, who knows if the government is going to keep the gas on. So, sorry to be Debbie Downer, but I just wanted to say that I think home solar panels could really save humanity if things get really crazy in the next couple of years, or if, other countries start dropping bombs on us, because it happens in Europe, it could happen to us someday. So, thanks for listening.
Anybody else?
Lavender, 5803 Vaughn Road. I'm doing my best Peter Stevens intimidation. A couple housekeeping things. I appreciate the comments on both sides, the discussion on screening. So often the questions that come up when we sit behind the table, we hear multiple views. And the solar screen it's up in my top 5 of curious observations. I think my number 1 was the roosters discussion, or animals. If I had to guess who liked roosters or who didn't think roosters, I couldn't do that straw poll. But I thought it was important what you all have done is to keep the conversation civil and respectful for both sides of that argument. I think that's essential going forward. But a couple of housekeeping things. So the other one that came up, so in that light, maybe ask yourself the rhetorical question, where do you stand on sirens for tornadoes? I don't know if Jeff gave it. We had a survey that David came back, and I heard, well, here's the point though, is that the sirens I thought were, the argument for putting them up, I think it's like 9 towers around, was reasonable. Or for not putting them up, I also thought was reasonable. But we sent out a survey that went out online. So if you ask Donna and or Elena about that relative to what you have here, you can get that data. I think Michelle's point's also well taken as if, how you interpret that data, you want to be careful, but you can do that here, I think, here pretty quickly. But on the siren question, it came back categorically. 1,200 responses. It was not only heck no, or it was not only no, it was heck no. 1,150 folks came back and said, we don't want sirens, nor are we interested in paying any money in a village to have to put up. So it could be instructive, you don't have to wait 6 months for that. So the other comment that came back, this thing about active enforcement, I don't know where that's come from. My guess is it's an online source, but the board did address it last night also. There's never been a discussion on the board about active anything as far as enforcement. It's always been complaint driven. There was some discussion as to how far you take the complaint. Stuff a piece of paper under someone that brings an issue to the board as to how far that goes. They sign it as anonymous, not anonymous. Some discussion as to what they do if they want to have to go to court and so on. But the word active has never come up, nor both budget board members expressed their opposition to that active, and I support that also. So thanks for your time. Thank you.
Thanks, Brandon. Anybody else? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 19, which is informational items, correspondence, and comments. I have one informational item. For those of you who are interested in the master planning process, Chelsea is having a multi-area planning commission, joint municipal area planning commission master plan open house on Wednesday, June 24th at 6 p.m. at Sylvan Township Hall. So, for those of you who haven't been through it before, you want to go over there and learn how this happens. I'm going to try to go because since 5 years ago, as we've talked here, some of the things have changed. I'd like to hear how they're attacking it in the current world we live in. So, that's my information. Does anybody else have any informational thing? I have one last comment.
I have a comment. Okay, deeper comment, I can go first.
I'm going first. But I have been privileged to have worked with Sri.
Nobody gave me Kleenex today, so.
No, there's napkins in there, and we'll get to that in a minute. She has been an outstanding resource, in my view, to the township and to this planning commission. She's diligent, sometimes works a little too hard to find out too much information. But on the other hand, I don't think there's ever been a piece of information that she has not provided that has been valuable to our work. I am personally and professionally sorry to see her leave, whatever length of time that is, whether it's short or longer term. And to that end, I am going to clap like I did last night. You're welcome to too. If you don't care, too bad, because I am. And in that vein, excuse me, when this meeting is adjourned, there is cake and drinks for her that we'll be bringing out and have a little goodbye party. So, it's ready. I said it last night, and I'll say it again. Don't come to just one meeting. Come to them from time to time and understand the process. And when you understand the process, you'll have a much better view of how we get to where we are and the kinds of work that goes behind what comes into these ordinances that both PC and the board adopt. It's, as you saw tonight, this case on the small solar is not closed. I think a lot of people thought it was. We try to do the best we can. So that's all I have.
Okay, two comments. So, regarding the losses coming on bad data, and you're absolutely right. Nothing worse than no data is bad data. Past master plans, surveys, we do ask what section the respondent is from. So we can cut the data if we do it again that way. The response is based on which section of the township that response comes from. So we can see, is this coming from a large development, or is it coming from a very rural part of the township? So we would do that. Second, I echo Tom's comments, Sheree. I've been here 25 years. I've never experienced the zoning administrator and planner of your caliber. Yeah.
I'm going to augment that. If you guys were around longer than I was, if any of you had seen what she walked into from the previous planners and administrators, and the number of inconsistent rulings, inconsistent zoning ordinances, the variances among them, how anybody was able to administer anything in this township on a consistent basis. I went through it one time in my professional career and walked in and literally, and it's literally the same things you walked into. I walked into and the guy opened the drawer and he said, "Here, Tom, fix it." And there was a stack of stuff this far from vendors all over God's over Green Acre. She walked into the same thing because I saw the drawer that she opened. And in it was a stack of paper about that high of unattended to, inconsistent stuff. It's just nuts. And she got through all that and has continued to serve us in an exemplary capacity. So, anybody want to make an adjournment and have some cake and whatever? Motion to adjourn. Second. Motion to adjourn, second. All in favor?
Aye.
The party's right there in about 2 minutes.